And we're back once again, only on it's Last Call. Last Call of the Alcohol, only on the Last Call podcast.com. And joining me here on location, this man will we're I know even though the NFL season is upon us and it's hitting its stride in week 9, we're gonna get ready for the NFL draft because there's so many teams that are already, well, how do I put this, out of contention, looking for help. And it's never too early to start previewing big games going on in college, big players happening here. So we're bringing in this man to help me separate fact from fiction and drop some knowledge on us. I give you NFL draft and college football analyst. I give you it's Andy from Andyy NFL Substack. So Andy, let's start off here with here's the question that's been on my hand. A lot of it is quarterbacks. We know the big ones, of course, but this weekend there's going to be a couple of quarterbacks I'm curious about and your thoughts. Let's start off with, I'd say, the man who we sort of overlook, and that is Joey Aguilar. Transferred from Appalachian State to UCLA, then Nico I may have transferred out of Tennessee. He went to Tennessee. He does pretty well. So let me ask a question. Why is it that we sort of just overlook this kid despite the fact he stepped into a hostile situation and he's done pretty good for Tennessee?
Yeah, I've been pretty impressed with what we've seen from Joey Aguilar through the season. Now we're at the halfway point. There's been some up and down moments. His game against Georgia started fantastically and then ended tough, and they ultimately went on to lose that game. But Joey Aguilar, he has 2,344 passing yards, fourth in the nation currently, 18 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. He has a lot of good tools you like to see from these SEC quarterbacks. I mean, just a couple days ago against Kentucky, almost 400 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, a very clean game. So going into this weekend in what's going to be a hotly contested SEC matchup against Oklahoma against Tennessee, Joey Aguilar is definitely a guy who could spring himself into more NFL talks. I believe this is his last year of eligibility, so he will be in this draft. And this would be one of those games where if he can go ball out, show who he really is against number 18 ranked Oklahoma, we will be talking about him on an NFL basis. And his name will be out there.
How much credit should we give him the fact that, and you deal with a lot of numbers, in terms of height, weight, arm, accuracy, release and everything, but mentally, for a guy who has to follow big footsteps, because Nico Iamaleava was the big thing over Tennessee. He gets upset about money, he leaves, Joey transfers in, has to compete, and he's in. Basically, Tennessee's defense has not been great. Like, how much should we give credit that for a guy who made a jump from Appalachian State to now SEC? He's handled all this with a plum. Like, he hasn't faltered. We haven't seen him just get exposed. Like, how much credit should we give the mental toughness for a kid to do this where he wasn't even supposed to be here? He was a late, transfer. Now he's been thrown into the fire, which is the SEC.
Yeah, it was a really tough situation to come into. All the stuff with Nico over the spring, Nico was expected to be the starter there. There was never any thought about that over the offseason. It was freshman quarterback Nico has led this team to the college football playoff, and he's going to be there. He transfers. Joey Aguilar wins that competition. And it's been interesting because you note the mental toughness. Joey Aguilar had 14 interceptions last year at Appalachian State, led the nation in interceptions, and he moved up to the SEC. He's been Tennessee's starting quarterback, and he's improved. He's improved so much. And to walk into that situation where really everything was against him, and he's improved multiple steps to being one of the better starting quarterbacks in the SEC. It's really a note to like the mental toughness, and that's something that could set him up to be an NFL quarterback and get him drafted in April. So yeah, I mean, for everything that's been against him, he's really impressed.
So take me to the George game. What did you see that you liked? What did you see that you were, say, concerned about if you're an NFL scout?
Yeah, from the Georgia game, it was really in the early part of that game, I was watching and I was so impressed with him. I thought for a second, I mean, I've thought this for most of the season. Was this guy really an upgrade from Nico Iamaleava in the first place? I remember Tennessee got out to a hot start. I believe they put up 21 points in the first quarter. He had a phenomenal connection with Chris Brazzell that game. My favorite receiver for the draft. But he's really connected with these receivers on Tennessee fantastically. And you saw that so much so in the Georgia game to where he put up 371 passing yards and 4 passing touchdowns, put up 41 points in, albeit an overtime loss. But that was one of those games where he's connecting at a high level. There were a few mistakes, which is going to be, the detriment to his stock, is where Joey Aguilar is one of those guys who he's going to have. I feel like he's going to have, for every 3 good plays, he's going to have 1 bad play in there. Maybe 4 good plays, 1 bad play. And that was really apparent in the Georgia tape, where there were just some big mistakes, 2 of which led to interceptions. But again, what we're noting, the mental toughness of a guy. This was a guy last year at Appalachian State where you didn't think he was going to have to play against number 6 ranked Georgia and lead them to what almost looked like a win for half the game until, they collapsed in the fourth quarter and overtime.
So what do you want to see in Oklahoma? Because as you said, he'll make mistakes, in those inopportune times. He's a guy who, it sounds like he's a gunslinger where, yes, he will make some great plays. And then there's always that one play where it's like, oh my God, what the hell are you thinking? Why did you force it in there? So going into Oklahoma, which has a pretty stout defense, offense might be a little bit pop gun-ish. What do you want to see if you're an NFL scout from Joey Aguilar?
I really want to see a turnover-free game. If he can face number 18 Oklahoma, have no turnovers, that would be a phenomenal sight. That would be one of those sites where we're really talking about him on an NFL note, because that would be, for one, a phenomenal SEC victory at this point in the season, and 2, if Joey Aguilar can play mistake-free football, that is what you want to see from him at this point, because he connects with these guys, Chris Brazzell, Braylon Staley, and Mike Matthews at a phenomenal rate. All those receivers have over 500 yards at this point of the season. He dishes the ball out efficiently. He has multiple receivers that he goes to. He's not one of these quarterbacks who only targets 2 receivers in a given game. He targets everyone, and that's something I like about him, is he's going to let everybody eat. So if he can continue that and he can play turnover-free football against Oklahoma, that'll be a big win for Joey Aguilar.
Next quarterback is the guy that quietly has put up some great numbers, but you don't hear about him. That's Brendan Sorsby of Cincinnati. Yep. You look at the record, and I'm just off the top of my head, I'm trying to figure out how the hell he's done this. 7-1 for Cincinnati. They are right now near top of the Big 12. 20 touchdowns, 1 interception, 65% completion passes. He's run for over 425 yards. Why have we not heard about this kid? And is he the real deal? I mean, is this somebody that, all of a sudden scouts should take notice of and go, hey, this is a mobile quarterback. Hey, if he comes out, he might be a first-round draft pick in a class which already is sort of trying to figure out who the hell's in it and who wants to be, in the first round.
Yeah, Cincinnati has sneakily become one of those teams that might win the Big 12. And coming into the season, I did not think that of them. Brendan Sorsby has taken his game to new heights this year. Already has more passing touchdowns than he did last season. He has 20 touchdowns to only 1 interception. Been a very efficient passer in those regards. And he's sneakily one of the best quarterbacks in the country this year. And sneakily, a guy that has been getting praise from multiple analysts this week in terms of maybe this is the guy we're looking for to emerge as that quarterback 4 or quarterback 5 type in this NFL draft class. And with that, quite possibly comes a first-round pick. Against Utah this week will be, I think, the biggest test of his season so far, because it's widely considered to be the game of the week. I believe that's where College Game Day is this week. So you've got the game of the week. You've got Brendan Sorsby, who's garnering new hype this week, in a sense. And if he can go in, play football similarly to what we saw against Oklahoma State, granted, Utah, much better opponent than Oklahoma State, but if he can have that 270-yard, 3 passing touchdown, 1 rushing touchdown, turnover-free football against Utah, that will really put him on the map of we might have a first round quarterback, another first round quarterback on our hands in this draft class. And from the very unlikely Brennan Sorsby, because in the summer, nobody really thought about Brennan Sorsby as even an NFL prospect in this draft. But it's become he might be an early declare. He might be a first round pick in this draft because of what he is sneakily doing.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate and throw cold water on this. He is faced maybe two good teams, really. One of them, they lost to 17 to 20. He got held to 69 passing yards. Granted, he also ran for 69 yards and scored a touchdown against Nebraska. Iowa State, people argue they have no pass rush, so he gets to sit there and he gets to do his thing. And, this is what scouts are going to wonder. Is he a product of a spread option, which is, hey, yes, first read it's not there. All right, take off and run. He's a big kid. Does this translate to the NFL, or is this one of those players where you go, okay, it's Charlie Ward, Tim Tebow, Colin Kaepernick? It's okay. You get to the NFL and you do this, you're going to get killed.
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately the question. And it's one of those things where the defense you play against is obviously going to be a big question. And unfortunately, he's stuck to the Big 12 schedule, and the Big 12 does not have many great defenses this year. It has competitive teams, a lot of parity in that conference, which is awesome. But there's not the elite defenses that the other top quarterback prospects in this class are facing on a week-to-week basis. I will say, I think Brendan Sorsby is a more gifted passer than a lot of the spread option force quarterbacks. He's shown a lot of good stuff this season that attributes to an NFL quarterback prospect. I do have questions, and I'm not going to throw him into if I make a mock right now, I don't think I would throw him into the first round just yet because I want to see this in a 12-game sample size rather than just a 8-game sample size. I want to see him do it here. I want to see, can he propel Cincinnati to winning the Big 12? Because if he does that, that'll be a great thing. Because like I mentioned, nobody thought of Cincinnati as this Big 12 championship winning team coming into the year. But Brendan Sorsby has kind of elevated them into that. And if he can, end the season on a heater for Cincinnati, quite possibly go 11-1 with their remaining schedule, win the Big 12, something like that, I think that's where we start to say, all right, there's a lot of good tape on him now. And in this quarterback class, he might just be QB4.
Last quarterback. And this is the one that I get, it is Coke versus Pepsi. It is, less filling, tastes great. It is Darian Mensah. Biggest transfer in college football in terms of money. He was paid 2 years, $8 million by Duke. You look at the numbers, and their games, he just goes out and he balls. We talk about, of course, the Illinois game. He threw 23 for 24, 234 yards, 2 touchdowns. Then he goes out against, you're looking at Tulane, 30 for 51, 313 yards, 3 touchdowns. Duke, which isn't this is one of these NFL teams, all of a sudden find itself, in terms of, and when I say NFL, like they usually don't produce NFL, caliber players. They're in the hunt for the ACC. They play Clemson. What do you want to see from Darian Mensah, and why is he so bipolar? Where some scouts love and other scouts go, "Oh my God, no! This guy is uglier than an old leather shoe."
Yeah, Darian Mensah is a really interesting one to me because I am a fan. In the portal when he was leaving Tulane, I did not expect Duke to be the landing spot. And like you mentioned, Duke is becoming this team producing NFL talent, and Darian Mensah will be at the forefront of that. And while I think he is likely to be a 2027 prospect. I think he's likely to be one of the top quarterbacks in that class because of what we've seen this year. 8th in the nation in passing yards currently, 17 passing touchdowns to 2 interceptions. And we've seen phenomenal games from him week in, week out. He's played turnover-free football for the last 4 weeks. Phenomenal games against NC State, Syracuse, Cal, and Georgia Tech, especially this last week against Georgia Tech. Even though Duke lost that game, Darian Mensah put in an absolute heater. So if we can see a similar game like that, where he got 373 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, we can see that against Clemson. Darian Mensah is legit, and I already think he is, but I think where me saying he's a 2027 prospect comes in, I think there's a little bit of technical rawness in terms of his mechanics seem a little off to me. And that might be where some analysts, like you mentioned, are a little bipolar on him, is he does everything at a high rate, but it's just not pretty in a sense. And where I think a lot of his game can just develop out even further if he stays for another year and quite possibly one of the top quarterbacks off the board next year. I would bet right now that he is going to be a first round pick in the 2027 draft class because of that.
You've mentioned that the mechanics, and I've heard John Vogel of Draft Vogel talk about this. I've heard Parker Blake talk about this. I've heard draft professors talk about this. Why is this such a big thing? It's almost like, and I get it, everybody wants these perfect mechanics, but as they say in baseball, if you're hitting 300, who the hell cares about your batting stance? Like, why are the mechanics, I guess, such a hitch for a lot of people when, as long as he's throwing the ball, as long as he's slinging, as long as he's completing the passes, who gives a crap if he's, shot putting this, if it gets to the right place?
Yeah, I actually do agree with that sentiment in the way that it takes one team, it takes one GM, it takes one offensive coordinator to look at your tape and say, I don't care about the mechanics, get him into my system, and he's going to be elite. And that's going to be one of those things with Darian Mensah, as we talk about. Like, there's a chance he declares this cycle. I don't think he will because he is a redshirt sophomore. But if he were to declare even, I think there will be a GM or a coach who says, this guy has so much upside. I don't care about the care that he's too young. I'm going to take him and I'm going to get him into my system and he's going to develop here. Where I do think he's going to be a next year prospect is the age, he's raw in a sense, but he's producing very well. So I don't really think that matters right now. But it's just going to take one of those teams to say, I don't care about the mechanics. Give me this guy in the first round even, and we're going to work something out here because he has so much talent.
So let's go to the big debate. And I'm trying to put this in words here. Is you basically are right now, if you're scouting defensive ends, we're talking about size versus speed. There's some people say, you need a big defensive ends, you need power guys. There's other people who say, no, speed is good. What is the answer right now? Because that's sort of the one where we're looking going, all right, is there an answer? Is there not? Can you please tell us what's going on here?
Ultimately, I think it's very scheme dependent. I think it just matters what the defensive coordinator wants in terms of how guys will be drafted. But currently, if you ask me that, I side with speed here because you look at guys like Nick Bonito right now, who is having a career year as one of those DPRs. And I know that's kind of an outlier guy. He was the 64th overall pick. Nobody expected him to be as good as he is now. But you see these guys in college like David Bailey or R. Mason Thomas or Joshua Josephs, who are just producing at such a high level. And it's because of their quick step off the line. Their sack production, it comes from that. And it's really a designated pass rusher thing. And that's ultimately what some people's drawback is on the speed guys is they're likely just going to be limited to solely pass rushers in the NFL. But I also think that that's more valuable than being an elite run defender. On the other side of the debate, though, you get the size guys like Ruben Bain Jr. or Keldrick Falk. Granted, I think both are very good athletes at the same time, but you get the best of both worlds in terms of you're going to get a lot of pressures. You might not get the same sack production because I feel like the size guys, they draw a lot of pressure, but they don't have the same sack production as these speed guys who can get to the quarterback at an elite rate. I think it just depends on scheme for the most part because on my edge board right now, I have Ruben Bain 1, Keldrick Falk 2, and David 3. Granted, I'm very confident in all of them at an NFL level, and it's just going to depend who gets their hands on what. But it's a very interesting debate or topic because size, speed, it matters a lot for these Ds. It matters a lot for what you're going to draft. And obviously you want the best of both worlds, but generally it's just going to depend on who's drafting.
Like right now on my board, I have David Bailey, defensive end one. Yeah, I look at him and I go, he is going to put he's going to put offensive tackles on their heels all the time. He is this freak, speedy athlete. He can just rush the passer. Yes, he's maybe a bit of a one-trick pony right now, but that one trick right now is just devastating. And we've seen in the NFL how it's becoming, as somebody said, basketball on grass. You're seeing smaller wide receivers dominate. You're seeing speed guys dominate. Is that becoming the norm? I mean, because you'll have people like me say this is what the NFL is. Running game, it's okay. You need to stop the Mahomes. You need to stop with Josh Allen. You need to stop with Joe Burrows. How do you do that? You get to the quarterback. So for David, for those who say David Bailey should be defensive end one, how much of that is because he does that one trick, which is get to the quarterback and be able to put pressure on offensive tackles because he's so damn fast he can't catch him.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely valid because, like you mentioned, this is just the way the NFL is shifting, where these speedy guys on both the offensive and defensive side are just winning. And that is why I have a lot of confidence in David Bailey on an NFL level. I even have a lot of confidence in Cassius Howell from Texas A&M, who has 9.5 sacks this year and has been able to drop pressure at an elite rate. And I know with Howell, there's drawbacks about, well, the arm length, and that's going to make him fall come draft time. But again, it just takes one team to say this is how the NFL is shifting. It's becoming more of a speed sport rather than a size sport. And these designated pass rushers who are drawing elite production in college, you get them in the right defensive scheme and they'll continue that production onto the NFL. So I really just think that's how the NFL is shifting right now. And yeah, like you said, it's becoming, basketball on turf, where these speed guys are just winning because you have to stop these quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, all the amazing athletes. You get an amazing athlete off the edge, you might be able to stop them.
Which teams do you like right now for David Bailey in terms of like if they get him, they'll be able to maximize what he is? Like I'm guessing there's some teams, Kansas City Chiefs, that look at Bailey and go, he's too small, we can't use him. We like bigger guys. Which teams off the top of your head just do you look and go, they'd be a perfect fit? They would be able to know what he is and use him as he should be used.
It would be interesting because of the size, and I know their defensive ends currently are a little bit bigger than actually. I think they're relatively the same size. I would love David Bailey in Washington because that's a spot where I feel like they need more sack production, and Von Miller's only aging. So if you can bring David Bailey in over Von Miller, who's aging, that would be such a phenomenal pickup for them. Another spot that I would like is solely if they trade down at this spot because I don't think David Bailey will go this high. But I would be interesting. I would be interested to see him in Tennessee if they were to trade down. And trade down to where? I'm not sure yet. We'll have to see at the end of the year where David Bailey's stock is. But David Bailey would go to Tennessee, who needs pass rush production badly, and you pick up a guy who has already 10.5 sacks at this point in the season. We're 8 games into the year. David Bailey already has 10.5 sacks. That's elite pace we're on. I would say those two spots off the top of my head. But really, how the NFL is shifting these days, I think David Bailey could fit in virtually anywhere, and you'll get a ton of pass rush production with him.
Ruben Bain. He's basically the guy that I hear a lot of people love. How he has all these traits and all that. He has 2 sacks. So I guess that's a concern if you're a GM. Like if you're a GM and especially an owner, you're going, hey, I'm going to invest. Let's say I'm Tennessee, investing in a top 5 pick. This guy's going to be a Pro Bowler. How would you I guess assage the owner of a GM if you're a scout going, yeah, don't worry about the production. He'll be there when they're looking at this guy probably going, he's George Karlaftis. And I love George Karlaftis, but George Karlaftis is not a guy you look and go franchise defensive end, sack master, guy that you can build a defense around as the primary number 1 defensive star.
Yeah, I think Ruben Bain is a very interesting one because, like you mentioned, the sack production has been low this year. But what I do love about him is for being his size, I think he has a nuclear first step, true like heavyweight power, and he combines the height, weight, speed archetype very well. And while the sack production isn't there, he's one of those guys where I actually think it'll rise in the NFL just because of all these tools, and they'll come together. And as he develops, they'll come together. I see him sort of in the mold of one of these guys who, like I said, yeah, he's going to develop even more at the NFL because, the bend for a 270-pound guy across the edge, it's phenomenal. It's how he draws most of his pressures. Hasn't gotten as enough finishes as we wanted this year to be that, in number one prospect talk. But I do think the tape is that good in this class to where it will be an argument come draft season where is Ruben Bain the best prospect in this draft because of what we see on tape. Granted, if he finishes with 2 sacks, that's alarming. I think he'll finish with more. There's still more season to go. Miami could be in the ACC championship game. Miami could be in the CFP, and that would be a phenomenal opportunity for Bain to raise his stock. So we'll see where we're at the end of the season. But he has a couple good opportunities in the next few weeks to raise his production, and that'll be a big sign for his NFL stock.
You do a lot of stuff with the draft professor. So let me ask you this, because we're trying to identify wide receivers, and we have grades on everybody. Everybody has grades. Here's a question, though. What happens when you see a wide receiver who is stuck in a running quarterback system? And I bring this up with Eric Rivers. Preseason, there was a lot of buzz about this kid. Hey, got to keep your eye on him. He's going to be a force. Hey, got to keep your eye on this guy. He has great hands. He's fast as can be. And then we see him go to Georgia Tech, and he hasn't quite done it. And granted, look, it's Georgia Tech. They are a run-first team. Haynes King is more of a running quarterback than he is a pure passer. So if you're a scout, how tough is it, let's say, with Eric Rivers trying to figure out, is he a good wide receiver that's just stuck in an offense that's not suited for him, or is he a guy that they have to run because he's not the guy?
Yeah, it's very tough because wide receiver is the easiest position to just look at the box score and say he's producing or producing. In an Eric Rivers case, he only has 300 yards and 1 touchdown this season. It's very tough to analyze and scout these wide receivers in very run-heavy offenses. I think it just gets to a point, though, when they do pass and you turn on the tape, you can kind of tell if a wide receiver just has it. And Eric Rivers at FIU last year certainly had it, 1,172 yards, 12 touchdowns. Now this year, like I said, down to 300. And yes, I do think the move from FIU to Georgia is a little rough and has been a little rough, but I still do think there's a ton of talent in his case. Like he this past week against Syracuse had 5 receptions for 43 yards. I question if Georgia Tech is using him the right way too, because at FIU last year for Eric Rivers, they aired it out with him more. They let him go deep. They let him run routes more suited for him, whereas Georgia Tech kind of closing it up and just running short stuff with Eric Rivers. So when you scout, it's kind of tough because in the summer I was high on Eric Rivers too. He was a top 100 prospect for me. And we're now at the point where it's kind of tough to justify top 100 on Eric Rivers just because of how Georgia Tech has used him and where we're at with him. I think it will be a sign in the coming years that wide receiver prospects who have aspirations going to the NFL will know I'm not going to transfer there because it's solely a run offense with an option quarterback and a good running back. And the stats last year back it up that they just ran a lot. And I go in there. We'll see, but my production's probably going to drop. So I feel like wide receiver like that in coming years transferring to schools like Georgia Tech, albeit it works for Georgia Tech. They're 8-0. They're the number 8 team in the nation, but we'll see.
Second guy, and this is a little more sort of, well, we know he's good, but is it the quarterback? That is Kevin Coleman Jr. of Missouri. Again, we've seen them produce. We've seen them play well in spurts. Unfortunately, Brent Previous is not a very good passing quarterback. Mott Hardy is the bell cow from Missouri. So again, with a guy like this, how tough is it? Where we see more in terms of what we've seen from Eric Rivers, but again, it's still the same. All right, he doesn't have the big numbers. Is it him though, or is it his quarterback is just not a good enough quarterback to get him the ball.
Kevin Coleman is one of the guys who's easier to pick up on and scout, because this year there are 3 games right now where you can point at and say that is a game that I'm going to draft this guy off of, and that's week 2 against Kansas, where he had 10 receptions for 126 yards and a touchdown. A couple weeks ago against UMass, where he had 12 receptions for 120 or 112 yards, and then this past week against Vanderbilt, where he had 7 receptions for 153 yards. These cases, it's easier to get sold because there are 3 games of tape on him where you can turn on and sell yourself real high on him. So it's one of those things for when you're evaluating a wide receiver in a run heavy offense. If they can just get 3 games of very high level football on display, you'll be able to sell yourself on them. You'll be able to get a concrete scouting report on one of these guys. So yeah, I do like Kevin Coleman because of what he's been able to do in Missouri, which shifts to being a run heavy offense with Ahmed Hardy, one of the best running backs in the nation this year. But Kevin Coleman has still been able to have those draft statement level games.
So let's say you're an NFL GM and you're looking at the SEC and you're going, okay, well, this Chris Brazell is second. Man, I want him. He's big and fast. You're looking at Mario Craver. Once again, hey, he's pretty big and fast. You're looking at just the stats. You're looking at Kevin Concepcion. Man, this guy has all the highlights. You're looking at Kevin Coleman, though, and it's like, oh, it's just a possession receiver. Is that fair? Or is that is that the, hey, look, my quarterback doesn't have the arm, really can't get it down the field. I'm kind of stuck in this sort of pop gun offense.
Yeah, it's certainly tough because it definitely could be how the offense is being run. In this case, though, comparing him to guys like Brazil, Concepcion, and all them, I like them more just because of it's kind of the week to week thing where they're just consistent week to week. Whereas we've seen Kevin Coleman just completely vanish in some games. 1 reception for 2 yards against Alabama, the biggest game of Missouri's season. He was virtually nowhere to be seen. And that will obviously become a talking point with Kevin Coleman between scouts, GMs, all of that in the draft season when you're talking about if you want to draft this guy. Well, where was he against Alabama? Could obviously relate back to Bo Perbula, the Missouri offense, and how it was run. But that could also reflect on what you see on tape against Alabama. If you are just not sold at all on Kevin Coleman and didn't think he was able to get open, there's that. But if you watched that game, you thought Kevin Coleman was able to get open, it just wasn't working, then that's an offense issue, and Kevin Coleman has the goods in a sense. That's kind of where I think scouting a wide receiver in a run heavy offense goes to. It's on tape. Are these guys just getting open, or are they vanishing and we're just blaming it on a run heavy offense when in reality, this guy wasn't helping himself get any targets?
So I'm going to put you, say you're Kevin Coleman's agent, and you're going in front of the scouts, and they're asking you the same questions. How would you defend him? Let's say, they're going, hey, why doesn't he have the numbers that Chris Brazell second has, that, Kevin Concepcion has, that, Gio Bernard has, that Isaac Satania has? Like, because if you're Kevin Coleman, you have to be concerned. Like, you don't want to just throw your quarterback under the bus and go, "Yeah, my quarterback sucked ass and swallowed." So, who defends them? Like, and how tough is it for wide receivers where you had to play that game where it's like, look, I am this good, but you can't just say, "Well, my quarterback was god awful. That's why my numbers were not so good."
Yeah, I think if I was his agent and taking those questions from GMs, I would say, well, look at the games he thrived in. Don't look at the negative, look at the positive. Because against Vanderbilt this past week, he was phenomenal. And that's what you can get in Kevin Coleman. You get him in an offense that is more friendly to him than Missouri has been. You're going to get this kind of production out of him. And that's really what I would say to all these GMs is look at the games he thrived in. Vanderbilt, 7 receptions for 153 yards. Kansas, 10 receptions, 126 yards, and a touchdown. This is what you can get from Kevin Coleman if he finds an offense that suits him more, that is a better fit for him. And yeah, that's really all I would say is just look at the positive and not the negative.
All right, we're going with if you thought this was controversial, You ain't seen nothing yet, folks. How am I gonna put this here? Kadyn Proctor, and we're gonna pull a picture of him soon. Is well, you either love him and you think he's one of the bestest things since the iPod and deep dish cheese pizza, or you're some of these scouts that are looking at going, "Oh my god, this guy's not even like a first round draft pick. He's like a fifth round draft pick." I mean, I've seen people say, Yes, he is great." And I've seen other people go, "No, oh my god, he is horrible." Yep, there it is, folks. Kadyn Proctor, and yes, some people love him because, well, Alabama uses him as a wide receiver, as a wildcat quarterback. Why is everybody so like polarizing? Where I've seen some scouts go, "Yes, he's a legit NFL tackle," but others are like, "Oh my god, this guy's horrible. He's just basically just a big lug. That's it. We don't know if he's that good."
Yeah, Kadyn Proctor is certainly probably one of the top talking points within this NFL draft class because, like you said, you either love him or you hate him. Um, and I will not lie, I am not a huge Kadyn Proctor guy. I've said it. I think at this rate, I think I would be way more comfortable plugging him in at guard in the NFL rather than tackle because I see him being someone like a Mekhi Becton at the NFL level, where you start him at tackle. I don't think it's going to work because I think he's I think his hand placement and pad level are just too inconsistent to thrive at the NFL level. I think his athleticism is poor to hold up on the outside. And I think he over relies on raw power rather than refining technique, which is just an overarching red flag. But there are some good with him. I mean, he's a Feldman Freaks list player. He's 6'7", 360 pounds, 370, I think, at this point. Solid recovery ability. Obviously, the gadget play that you mentioned of him being this guy you can just move out to wide receiver or fullback and run on the goal line. He's there's some times where you're astonished by his reps. This guy's awesome. And then the very next rep he loses painfully. And that's where that's where the controversialness comes with him is there are some really good reps and there are some really bad reps. It's just what you choose to focus on because his losses are really bad to me, but his wins are like this guy can hold up a tackle. So it's a little like bipolarness in his play almost where, he's got explosive hands until they get outside and, his hand placement wavers against like elite speed rushers. So it's really just I don't know how well he can hold up at the next level at tackle. And I think he may be better suited to be a guard. And I think that'll be something that is talked about a lot in the draft season where a team that needs a guard could very well take this guy in the first round. But if you're solely looking at him as a tackle prospect and you still take him in the first round, that's where I'm going to get a little, I'm not going to like the pick as much.
All right, I love Kadyn Proctor because once again, as you said, though, it's still the size. This is a 6'7", 368-pound offensive tackle. It's like a human grizzly bear, except with people skin. We've seen him just like obliterate defensive ends and defensive tackles when he starts getting, downhill speed. You feel bad because they just got run over. Oh yeah, wait a minute. Oh, another SEC defensive end just got run over. And you said there's times when he looks like every Pro Bowler that you want. He is just the size, the speed. So I'm going to ask you this, and I know you're going to hate this because Parker Blake hates this. John Vogel hates this. Jim Wickens hates this. Every NFL draft professor, scout I hear hates this because you know what I'm going to say. What coaches and GMs are going to say. We can fix him. Get him in the program. We're going to get our offensive line coach to just tweak this up. You hear this. So on a side note, how much do you hate that when you're doing this scouting and you're hearing a guy go, we can fix him, as if it's like, oh yeah, we're fixing up like a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or yes, we're fixing up a she shed. And you're like, no, you can't sometimes fix this because He is what he is. Unless you're Jeff Stoutland, all of a sudden you get him, and now you go, oh yeah, they can fix him.
Well, yeah, I mean, if he can end up in Philadelphia, like I said earlier when we were talking about it, he kind of reminds me of Mekhi Becton in some ways, where initially you thought he was a lost. You thought he was lost in New York with the Jets. You thought he was done for. He goes to Philadelphia, he gets fixed. So, I mean, there is a way that, yeah, I think there is a way that you can fix Kadyn Proctor to the next level, actually, because, like I said, it's a fix that we talk about for so many offensive line prospects nowadays, but I think he's better suited for guard than tackle. And I think we're getting to a point in college football in the draft where this is getting to be a bad notion, where every tackle prospect can seemingly fit in at guard. And if they fail at tackle, well, we'll just play him at guard. At some point, there's going to be way too many guards in the NFL and way too little tackles with how we talk about this. But I do see that happening with Kadyn Proctor. So, in a way, there is a chance to fix him.
Getting back to the original point, he has size, he has speed, he has athletic ability. I get it. There's a lot of stuff, but I mean, we could go over this unless you're Joe Wall, that once in a lifetime prospect who comes out and everybody goes, "Oh my God, he's the perfect tackle." How much of this is almost every tackle where it's like, well, they need to fix this, they need to tighten up this. Oh, there's this, or sometimes, well, there's health issues, or they have short arms. Like for those who are high on Proctor, how do you combat them? And they'll say, "Great, you're complaining that he's not perfect. That's every friggin' tackle we've gotten in the last 5 or 6 years. None of these guys are perfect. That's why we have offensive line coaches."
Yeah, there's obviously some traits that you got to love with Proctor. Um, I mean, the size for one. And like you said, there's no perfect offensive tackle prospect unless your name is Joe Alt, or like if we're just looking at it from this year's standpoint, there's virtually no elite offensive tackle prospect. I like Spencer Fano a lot, but I wouldn't consider him a Joe Alt level of prospect. So this is kind of one of those years where you can take a swing on Kadyn Proctor. You can fall in love with the traits, and you can say, well, I mean, what other tackle would we have taken there? Because Kadyn Proctor will have the highest upside of the tackles on the board. I'm thinking here like a mid to late first round. Kadyn Proctor could very well have the highest upside between any of those guys taken. So that'll ultimately be the thing where if a GM falls in love with the upside and the idea of Kadyn Proctor at the next level, he will be taken in the first round because there are some tools to just fall in love with. But it's one of those things dating back to one of the first things I said on Kadyn Proctor is you can fall in love with the good or you can hate the bad about Kadyn Proctor because they're very far apart. The good reps are phenomenal. The good reps are first round. The bad reps are horrible, and the bad reps are late day 3. So it's really just whatever side of the spectrum you want to fall on, because there are analysts with a high first round grade on Kadyn Proctor, and there are people with 5th round grades on Kadyn Proctor.
So the last question before we have to let you go is the question that every NFL GM is dreading right now. With Proctor, with quarterbacks, with Armaj Reed Adams, with guards, defensive ends. How much is all of this partly because we are getting more coaching turnover and more chaos right now than ever? I mean, we've seen coaches now get fired because they're not winning enough, whether it's in Penn State or LSU. We've seen coaches get fired sometimes after 2.5 years, like in UCLA, Virginia Tech. With the way that college is, where you got to win right now, and you got to win at least 8 games, and you got to win, at least go to a playoff. How much does this affect NFL prospects in that offenses are getting sort of dumbed down? Coaching for offensive linemen is getting dumbed down. Like everything is becoming more simple because they need to, win right away. And damn the coaching for NFL, talent. We just got to win, baby.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting question because a lot of the notion is that the NFL doesn't really develop these players unless they specifically draft them to. But the colleges, the programs develop these players. And when you get so much coaching turnover, it's hard to really make it a consistent thing. It's one of those things that I would be interested to see in this cycle. The LSU job is opened. And two potential people for that job could be guys like Bills offensive coordinator Joe Brady and Lions defensive coordinator Kelvin Shepard. These are guys that if you want to get an NFL side of things in Baton Rouge, for example, you could poach one of these coordinators if they'd be willing and put them into a head coaching job in college, and you could get the best of both worlds. You could get, the NFL development and a winning program. Kelvin Shepard is one of the guys I'm really interested in too, because I don't know when he'll be on track to get an NFL head coaching job. I'm a big fan of what he's done in Detroit so far, but this is his first year as a defensive coordinator. So we'll see when it kind of um, comes together for him to get NFL head coaching interest. But we could seriously talk about this guy as, the next LSU head coach if he chooses to go down that, because I think it would be such a fun idea for what, Kelvin Shepard has been this year. If you could insert him into Baton Rouge, you could get the best of both worlds here. And that is something I'm interested to see if that happens more in college in the coming years, to get the best of both worlds.
Like right now, you're looking at, as you mentioned before, with Cincinnati and also with Oregon. These are two very popular programs. These are two teams that are doing very great. They're two teams that run a spread option. And when you scout this, I know, Andy, I know you, Parker Blake, have said offensive linemen aren't developing that well as much. Quarterbacks are sometimes not as developed as they used to be. How much of that is because of a spread option? It's easy and it does great and it can put up numbers and people can do well, but it's not something that the NFL looks and goes, that's what we want. That's survivable in the NFL, especially with more complex defenses.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned Oregon specifically in this, because Will Stein, their offensive coordinator, he does a phenomenal job at developing these guys. But as an NFL draft evaluator, you just dread it. You don't like it because it's not substantial to the NFL game. It's not concrete tape you're watching. I feel like it's why Bo Nix was so controversial in the 2024 draft cycle, because they had so much talent on that team. They were running a spread option. They were running everything short. And we're kind of seeing it again with Dante Moore this year. Two first round level quarterback prospects, you start overthinking in a sense because, well, everything's going short. Will Stein is kind of closing it up and they're running a very efficient offense, but how sustainable is it at an NFL level? And it's one of those things where when they open up the offense for, the 6 times or whatever they do a game, and you get those NFL level throws, that's really all you can seriously evaluate on an NFL note. The, 6 to 8 times a game where you're going to see a real NFL throw, a real NFL process being made, because these offenses are so, option down, college friendly, efficient offenses.
So how would you fix this? I'm going to put you on the hot seat here because there's going to be, as you said, right now, top three of the top 6 teams in the NCAA are Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon, and they all run spread option. They all run spread offenses. NFL scouts and NFL GMs looking, going, oh my god, how the freaking are we going to identify these guys? Because this, you can't run this in the NFL. So if you were in charge of college football and the NFL and you could say this is how we're going to fix this, is there a fixable way, or is this just going to be the future? I mean, how would you fix this if you could fix it?
I think it's tough because it's honestly unethical in a way to take it out of college football because it's so efficient and it just works for these teams. But yeah, when you talk about an NFL GM watching this, it's so mind-boggling and frustrating, honestly, because you want to see NFL throws, NFL processes being made on a down-to-down thing, but instead it's just a short, efficient option offense. I don't really think there's a way to fix it. I mean, the thing that I would like to see from these offenses is, can you just air it out a little bit more? Can you just let your NFL quarterback prospects play like NFL quarterbacks a little bit more? That's all I'm asking. From a guy like Dante Moore, I feel like whenever I'm watching Oregon every week, they only open it up a few times a game, but when they open it up, it's working. It also hurts some prospects like Kenyon Sadiq this year, where Kenyon Sadiq, when they opened it up against Rutgers, he had 80 yards for 2 touchdowns. Then the next week against Wisconsin, they were playing a very closed offense. Granted, Dante Moore got hurt in the third quarter of this game, so wasn't the best of their abilities. But he only got 1 catch for 6 yards in this game, and it was a very option offense. It was a very college efficient offense, and it can hurt these prospects where you want to see so much more than you're actually seeing, because when you see the full NFL level offense being ran, it's helping these guys. It's making them look like true NFL first round prospects. But when they close it down, when they run option efficient offenses, it's just bland. It's not leaving you super impressed.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, you can check him out. He is on top of a lot of things because he is one of, if you don't follow him yet, you need to follow him soon because he knows his stuff. I give you once again NFL draft analyst and college football analyst. I give you Andyy NFL. So Andy, once again, where can fans check you out at? Where is the Substack? Where's the podcast? Twitter, Instagram. Where can fans check out your work?
Yeah, Andyy NFL on Twitter, Andy with 2 Y's, and then andynfl.substack.com. That's where all of my work is. I also guest appear on Draft Professors on Tuesdays talking about the wide receiver draft class, which I'm having a lot of fun with this year. But yeah, that's really where all my work is now. And Chris, once again, thank you for having me on. It was a blast talking college football with you.
Pleasure's all mine. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, Andyy NFL. You can check him out on Andy on Substack. You can check him out on Twitter. You can check him out with Draft Professors. Is all over the place. We come back. A lot more going on here. Only on it's Last Call. Last Call of the Alcohol. Only on the Last Call Podcast.com.